This is the home page of our portal. So the portal is where you manage our software platform. So the Smart Building Operating System, which is our Smart Spaces product, you administer the application, which is our smartphone, iOS and Android app from this portal. One of the core features of this portal is our digital twin. So if I go from the left-hand side navigation, I select digital twin on the left-hand side. This opens up the basement, and today I'm presenting the Future Works in Slough, which is an Ashby Capital building. It's one of our recent smart buildings, and the key attributes are this is one of the very few live data digital twins where all the data points from this building are captured within this model. For instance, if I go through the right-hand side, I can talk through a few of the features. So we have access control here that enables access to the building and manages access to the building. And we will demo some of that later alongside the lighting control, HVAC controls and climate controls, energy reporting, analysis, so analysing any devices within the building or any temperature or flow rates, etc. The support within the building, the lifts, desk sensors. So if you're deploying flexible working arrangements and agile working, we have desk sensors deployed. We have a booth sensor for cool booths or for breakout areas. We have our indoor air quality sensors. We have our occupancy sensors. We have our occupancy sensors that can target exactly where an individual is within the space, and I'll show you that a bit later. ANPR, so automatic number plate recognition to manage the capacity of the car park. Device points, which is how we scan all the points within a building and understand the full makeup of the data available. Parking sensors, so we understand with people using the EV charging bays or what the capacity is within the spaces in the basement. And then info, which I'll show you a bit later, which is the documentation. So whilst I'm on this level, it'll be worth sort of diving into the ANPR. So what this does, this loads up a live availability of the car park. So here you can look at all the different occupiers and what their current capacity is within the car park. This is very useful.
And is this real? Is this live, or is this a mock-up?
This is live. So this is live data coming through from our system. The whole of the Future Works is sort of a live asset. So everything you're seeing here today is a live demo of our building in Slough.
Great.
Brilliant. So if I then come out of this and I click into the parking sensors, you can see there the little red dot. That means there's a car parking. So it's just a single car in that EV charging bay at present. And the benefit of this is that wireless sensors now have got to the cost point where they're very cost effective to deploy, and it helps manage your building effectively. And so with things like the EV charging bays that are in the basement, we don't want like the electrical vehicle owners to squat in these spaces. You know, you want to have a fair use policy, and so this is an effective way of managing that. You can actually look historically by going back through the calendar of exactly how that space is used.
And who do you work with on the sensors, or do you make your own?
Yeah, so no, we don't manufacture any of our own sensors other than the indoor air quality sensor, which is not manufactured, it's just white labeled for us. We tend to really focus on the software. It's really the key skill set our business deploys is integration. As you can imagine, in this building, there's probably around 25 different systems that we're integrated with. And so that's the core of our product, is bringing all the disparate data sets back into a single pane of glass, which is the digital twin.
Yeah, and which manufacturers do you prefer for the sensors?
Interesting. I mean, we do bench test a whole host of different sensors. So the parking sensor there is a Bosch sensor that we've been using. Obviously, when you see a name like Bosch applied to the sensor, you know it's going to be good quality. It's been used globally for a long time, so that gives us a lot of confidence. But still, we'll want to deploy that sensor into a live environment and understand that exactly how it performs. And we've found that different battery powered sensors, we start to understand their battery life and how much maintenance is required. Obviously we're big fans of battery powered sensors, but we do also realize over time there's a maintenance and also an impact on the environment, because these batteries need to be disposed of. So we tend to evaluate each technology every time we deploy it within the building. So this is the architectural model. So it's a Shepherd Robinson building. It was developed in about 2017. So one of the key things I'd like to get across is that by no means was our technology in the building from day one. It was a retrofit, and retrofit is way more achievable than you'd think, especially when you deploy our software. What we like to think is sometimes our software sort of upgrades a building. If you've got a building that was developed in the last 10 years, we can deploy our software and it gets very close to some of the leading buildings out there. So as I rotate around the building, you can see all the different terraces there, and we have live data points within the building. So we can see live data, and this is live actually. This is pulling through. So actually at present there's no energy being generated or harvested by the solar PV, which actually is a common thing. Actually, we've noticed that across our portfolio of buildings, the PV that never seems to be generating as much power as we'd expect, and that's actually something now we can create a report for the client for them to investigate. So this is the external. So when we come down into the reception, and what I can do is I can just actually go down to the ground floor by navigating there on the right hand side. We can come into the reception here. We have a first person. So here I can navigate around, come into reception, rotate round, and see there I've just clicked on the turnstile. So what has happened is that my system's connected to the access control system, and it can tell that the disabled gate is locked there. We can actually enable that. So that will enable that to unlock for a period to allow someone access to the building. And we will also have the ability to manage like the card holders, the app users that have access to that turnstile. And that's the same for every asset within the building. We break the building down into its individual components, and then you can create groups of those components with permissions. So a lot of the permissions I have in the digital twin are identical in the app. So if I'm allowed to unlock that door in the app, I'm also allowed to unlock that door through the digital twin as well.
So just so I can understand, this isn't just a record, a digital twin in the sense of showing the designs of where things are. You can actually control things in real time and open gates, and
that's exactly right. Yeah, that's it. So essentially, if I click on like a luminaire in here, I'll get a real-time status of the current lighting parameters within the building. So here I have the ability to dim the lights, etc. And so that's, if I go up to the floor, for instance, if I go up to the second floor, I can sort of show you some more of that in action.
And are you able to monitor the usage by the client or the building manager of all of this kit, how much they're actually using it, looking at it?
Yeah. So in terms of the digital twin, because it's managed for energy reporting, so the bills that are calculated to charge the tenants, it gets an incredible amount of usage. The same for understanding the occupancy as well. So for instance, if I click on these desks, those green desks there mean they're free, and I could actually go and use that desk now. So you can use this as a tool to understand the occupancy of the office and make sure you've got a desk there. And you also, once you've selected a desk, you'll be able to see by scrolling down here the environmental parameters. So for instance, humidity is quite low at 26, light levels at 14, temperatures 20 Celsius. Now, why this is important to us is that if I click on the fan coil unit above that desk, we can sort of see the correlation between the two. So what we're really hoping is that that's providing as near as 20. Yeah, so 21, I've got 19.2. So that's the sensor on the return air flow, but at the desk I'm delivering 19.2, which is within our acceptable range. So the great thing about this is if someone from one of these desks calls down to reception and says that I'm slightly cold or hot, they can actually point them to the digital twin or to the app, And they can see actually we're delivering a comfortable temperature. And if they want, they can actually tweak that temperature themselves. So they do have the facility to just warm it up slightly or cool it down slightly.
So that was going to be my next question, was who has access to what we're looking at now?
Yeah, so I'm logged in as the client, so I've got full access of my asset. If I log in as a user, so someone who uses the building, I'll only be restricted to the areas that I'm working. So for instance, it might be just this breakout area you can see here, or just this half of the floor plate that I lease. I wouldn't see the car park information. I wouldn't see the information on reception. I wouldn't see the information in the plant room. It would only be the assets for which I've leased. And that's all managed for our user management system. The neat thing about that is that it's completely synchronized with the app. So my app access, my access to getting into this floor using the Smart Spaces app is totally synchronized. So if I get create an account in the app, I get an account for the digital twin.
So do they use the app for other things in terms of the occupiers booking parking spaces or seeing if the EV bay is vacant? Presumably they have Smart Spaces for that, do they?
That's right, exactly it. Yeah. So the app is probably what you'd call the more transactional piece. So that's how you access the car park. That's how most of the temperature changes will go through the app rather than through the digital twin, albeit they are completely synchronized.
Right. Okay.
So if I close some of this down, one of the other nice things we do is that, there's an awful lot of documentation that's collated when this building was developed. Now, again, like I said, this is a retrofit. So what we've done, for instance, on the lighting system, we've gone through all the different documentation that was provided when the building was developed, and it's all linked in here. So these are all the maintenance documents for that particular asset, which is the luminaire. So when you need to service that luminaire, so it needs to be replaced, or there's an emergency lighting failure, this is your first port of call. And further on from that, so I've got the documentation here, I can actually then raise a support ticket on here as well. So I could come into here, click a new issue, and raise a support ticket on that particular asset. So you're really sort of centralizing the management of this space.
Does that link through to the suppliers or whoever's responsible if you have a preferred electrician to come in?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So it's routed. So it means that different topics go to different people. So if it's an FM query, it will go off to the building's FM department. If it's an electrical query, it could go straight to the building engineer. And one of the key aspects is sort of responsibility, because typically in a traditionally leased space, there might be areas that's the responsibility of the tenant. There's areas that's responsibility of the landlord. And so we can define that in our roles and permissions. So we can say if someone reports a cleaning item within the demise, which is this office here, that would go through to the office manager. Whereas if it was outside in the reception, it would be the building manager. So it's just making sure all the queries are going to the right people. But it is centralising it. I think that's the key. Is that we call this a single pane of glass, which comes from sort of the airline industry, where you have a cockpit where you've got lots of different data coming at you from all different dials. We can centralise that into one digital display, which coordinates it. It's doing the same thing with your FM. You're coordinating the management of the building by having lots of different people access it for different purposes, which is sort of automation in a way. So here I've got the lighting control. Sorry, go on.
Are you able to track the sort of results of this in terms of time saved or cost saved, in terms of building the business case for this for further buildings within a portfolio or for other clients? What's the impact of this? Yeah,
I mean, typically what we're looking at is an energy saving. So we can see that we've to date on some of our buildings, we've saved up to 20% of the energy that was consumed before we deployed our digital twin, by really raising a lot of the issues to the surface so that the occupier, the manager, can see exactly how the building's performing. And then in terms of the support queries, what's really nice is we do have the ability to track how long tickets have been left open, how quick they're being closed. And so you can really understand how effective you are at really providing great customer service within your building.
Yeah.
And so as we've sort of scroll around this floor plate, we have a number of different sensors deployed. If I zoom down to this area here, which is the breakout area, we have another sensor deployed, which is our booth sensor. So this is looking to see whether these booths are free. And again, I get all the different environmental parameters around how that's, so they're slightly warmer there at 19.9 Celsius. I come out of this and then come over to this meeting room here. We can actually look at something that's really fundamental at the moment with the advent of COVID is the really making sure that we're providing a healthy working environment. And so we have a sensor deployed within the meeting room, which allows us to monitor the air quality within the space. So I'm just going to rotate around here so you can see the meeting room. So here I've clicked on the sensor.
Indoor air quality, IAQ.
Yep, that's right. And so what I've got here is breathable volatile organic compounds. So these are things like ammonia, formaldehyde. They bleach off of fabrics or paint when a fit out is first completed. And actually what we've seen is the baseline come down over time. But being under 1 part per million is superb. And that's exactly, the sort of environment we want to provide.
Why does that go up after 8 o'clock in the morning?
That's a really good question. Sometimes we find that actually people have walked into that room, so it could be your aftershave. One of the funniest ones is the banana. If you have a banana and you open a banana and eat a banana in that room, it sends the volatile organic compounds off the charts. So yeah, there are some funny anomalies. I'd say there's another similar one where with the PM, which we'll come down to in a second, which is the particulate matter, when the cleaners go around, you sort of understand when they're hoovering because it's pushing some of the particles up into the air. But that's usually quite good because you've got an effective filtration system. The system will extract those particles from the air and clean them out. So here, humidity in the room at the moment, the CO2 is at 5 to 8 parts per million, which is within our acceptable range. If I click that, I can actually see those ranges there. So excellent is between 400 and 699. And so really there, we're sort of showing that, the air is being changed as frequently as possible. And there's quite an interesting angle on this where at present a lot of buildings are running their air handling units at 100% to clear the air through the space as fast as possible, as often as possible, to reduce the risk of COVID being distributed through the space. And what we can see is we can keep the CO2 levels really low. We know the air's fresh. We know the air's changing frequently enough. We could actually reduce that air handling unit down to, say, maybe 70%, monitor the CO2. And if we keep that baseline, we're not wasting the energy on just changing the air too often unnecessarily. But yeah, so really acceptable range there. We have a synthetic CO2, which is to keep the laser CO2 measurement in check. We have an overall indoor air quality score. So we're looking at making sure that the temperature is close to as 20 Celsius as possible. We're around 40% humidity. Our CO2 is below 600 parts per million. And we're providing a comfortable environment. We also have air pressure. We have particulate matter. Particulate matter 10 is like sort of dust you would see. That's visible dust in the air. And then you go right down to PM1, which is completely invisible to the human eye. And then PM 2.5. And PM 2.5 is the important one here because that's the one the government report on. So we can actually get data on the outside air quality. And compare it to the indoor air quality. And I think with the return to the office, evidencing that is a key aspect. And we've found that in some of our central London assets, we can have 12 times better air quality inside than outside because of the pollution. And that's even with the reduced sort of traffic at the moment. So it's even more important when things sort of pick up and there's more pollution in the atmosphere. So yeah, that's in a really good range. And again, I can click on that and I can get the ranges there.
One thing that people say about data in buildings these days is that there's almost too much and people don't know what to do with all the data that's being thrown off by sensors and things like that. Do you find this is a sort of usable way of presenting that people aren't overwhelmed? Is it a very labour intensive job to keep on top of all this?
Yeah, no, it's not really. I mean, the great thing is it's actually in the app, and in the app we make it slightly more digestible for the average user. Here, this is sort of what you'd call your advanced view, where you get a lot of the detail, but we summarise this in the app, and so it's very quick to understand. Exactly how the space is performing, but not necessarily overwhelming people with lots of charts and graphs.
Yeah, and I mean, talking more generally about the whole sort of smart building movement, that developers are at last sort of looking at this, but they don't necessarily understand what they want or how many integrations, how many systems. They've got legacy systems which can be a pain to integrate with. What was the process for deploying this in a retrofit? How long did it take? What sort of costs are we looking at?
Yeah, so it took around about 6 months to get this online. And that's really, first of all, looking at the building systems, we perform what is called a gap analysis. So we look at how far away these systems are to being an enabled, smart enabled, so being able to support our software. And then that throughout that 6-month period, we deployed a lot of different technologies and adapters to be able to extract the data and link it to our cloud platform. And you know, this building's BMS system is a very common BMS, which is in probably up to 60% of UK buildings. So it really helps us open up the market to be able to deploy this software.
Yeah, and are you talking eye-watering amounts of money to deploy this, or how does it fit into the budget?
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's really cost effective. I wouldn't want to say numbers now because I wouldn't want someone to come to me and say, "Oh, you said that building was this price," because obviously buildings are very different. So we quote every project on a project by project basis. But what I can say is it's really cost effective. Now you think, this is a great building, a great asset, but by no means is it going to be like one of London's skyscrapers like 22 Bishopsgate, where we also have our software deployed. But yeah, it fits into the budget for this building in Slough. So that
is there a lot of sort of upskilling or training to get the users, the FM team, the staff at the client to understand how to drive a machine like this?
Not really. I mean, the great thing is, I think what's happened with the software is it's made, so for instance, the reception team have this open on their desktop day in, day out. So when they welcome you into the building, our visitor management system is part of this digital twin. They book you into the building through this system. So it means that the system's open and used all day by different roles. And because of those roles and permissions, we train people for different aspects. So the building engineer, for instance, he wouldn't use the visitor management system. He would just use this dashboard. And I think by creating roles and responsibilities throughout the building management team, they just train on a sort of a subset of functionality in the app rather than the entire app itself. Albeit because the system is so comprehensive, the asset managers of the building, they tend to actually use more of the functionality on the system. They're not going to be booking people into the building day in, day out, but they want to see a holistic view of all the data in one place. And so the training varies between individuals. But we like to think the way we've designed this, the way we've designed the app, we've kept it as simple as possible.
And what was the first one that you deployed, you installed for somebody?
160 Old Street for Great Portland Estates. And actually, interestingly enough, that was on our version 1.0. What I'm showing you today is version 2.0. We're currently working on a project to deploy our version 2.0 there now.
And how long ago was that, the first one?
That was 2016. So, yeah, quite a while back now. We've been doing this for a while.
Because we've heard over the years that BIM and digital twins is a great concept, it's a great notion, it gets a lot of hype, a lot of fanfare, but people don't necessarily buy into it and use it. They find that the use cases, the sort of real world take up of it hasn't been as great as people might expect given all the hype. Are you seeing that change? Is there an uptick in developers actually wanting this on the ground?
Oh, 100%, 400%, I'd say, is what our inquiries have increased since COVID.
400.
It's been, it's shocked us actually. It tends to be that the phone's ringing in the office. We're getting invited to pitch on projects. I think the price point. I think where you mentioned that, I think actually I can understand that previously it has been hard to justify the cost, but where the cost points now come down, and then actually you do have so many different systems in these buildings to rationalize it all in one place so you can sort of comprehend how your building's performing. It's worth it, and so that's why I think that popularity has increased so much.
Yeah, and you mentioned energy, you mentioned air quality. What are the other things that landlords and developers are asking for?
I'd say, so occupancy is key. For instance, if I switch over to this window here, this is our office. And so here we deploy a sensor that shows exactly how people are using the space. So you can see in the right-hand side, that blue dot there is where I was positioned. This here is the team downstairs on the lower floors. What this is really used is to understand how the space is occupied. And I think with, the return to work, every landlord's going to be keen to understand how many people are within the office, and, is the office going to be used the same way as it was before? And by using these sensors and monitoring these positions of the individuals, and we don't actually know who these individuals are, we can actually look to see whether we could change the layout for the office to actually allow for more people, have more breakout areas. And we see that really, the future of managing real estate effectively will be occupancy data. And that's the same on this model here. So if we go into the desk sensors again here, looking at the historical data of when the space was used, we can go right back on these sensors and look at the occupancy data over a period of time.
And you mentioned about not knowing who they are. How do you handle data privacy at the moment?
Yeah, so when you consent to use the app, you are signing up to our privacy policy. We actually collect very minimal personal data. The personal data we are collecting is purely for security purposes. Your access pass is your phone and is the app. So we need to make sure you are who you say you are. So that's the key around the personal data there. But then all this occupancy data and the analytics that we have around how the space is performing, that's completely anonymized. We don't have any concept of the individual. Even those sensors that can pinpoint the position of someone within the space, we don't actually know who that individual is. And I think that's a key aspect of this. It's really to manage the space effectively rather than monitor individuals within the space.
And one of the other big sort of talking points with data at the moment is around standardization, especially around energy. There's lots of different certification schemes. There's different benchmarking systems, which if it carries on that way, with every different organisation and institution having its own way of measuring things, it's not going to be very useful for the industry, I don't think. Are you seeing any improvement on that? How do you manage that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that the Neighbours scheme is here. Always makes me laugh because it comes from Australia and it's called Neighbours. But it's the Neighbours scheme will allow for standardised real-time reporting of energy data across commercial assets. So that is a key to getting that standardization, so you can compare buildings and building performance. And what's great about a digital twin is that it will aggregate all that data, and then we can submit that data and present that data in that standardized format. And I think that's probably one of the best selling points of a digital twin, is that it can collate data from disparate systems and standardize it into a format that then can be compared asset to asset, but also work with schemes like Neighbours and Brian.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And you said your inquiries are up 400%. How many have you got installed, and how many people are you talking to at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, in terms of talking to people, probably 30 property companies. We're deploying globally as well, so that's great for a business like mine based in London. So we're deploying across the world, and that's the great thing about technology like this. We worked on a big office campus in central London where we could deploy through the cloud. We didn't have to go boots on ground, which was great. And in terms of buildings now, on our iPhone app, we're up to around 20 million square feet now. So so well over 100 buildings, which is amazing.
Yeah. And how do you do the installation then if you're working remotely and you don't have to be on the ground? Yes. You've got hardware there and sensors and things going in. Is that local installers? Yeah,
local installers. We can send them directly to the property management company. They're battery powered. We have instructions on how to apply those sensors. We have software that you can install onto your network, which will be able to create the cloud link to give you this kind of integration. And where we've been really fortunate is the larger property companies we work with, they have teams that are very able to do this. I think where we have more boots on ground deployments are the smaller property companies where they don't tend to have those teams. They won't have an internal IT team, for instance. So that means that we have to visit the building, but that's fine. We are set up to do that. Our company's fast approaching 40 employees, so we do have that support framework to be able to assist with that.
And how difficult is it to install new systems with legacy systems and get all the different switches and wires and pipes and all that tricky stuff sorted?
No, it can be. I mean, my wife always jokes around my phone, the sort of photos I have of risers and comms cabinets. And wow, I mean, over the years we've been doing this. I think when we really first started doing this around 2015, we would walk into a building and our minds would melt on the state of the systems within a building. We'd see multiple. We had one building where it had 14 ADSL connections. That every time someone won the maintenance contract in the building over the past 5 years, they'd put a new ADSL connection in to monitor the network externally. So obviously, cybersecurity risk there. And so what we did there is remove all those 14 connections, get a single secure connection brought into the building. We rationalized these networks. So you typically in one of these buildings, you're going to have an access and control and CCTV network. You're going to have a BMS network. You're going to have a lighting control network. We want to segregate those, secure those, and then we link those to our system. And that's when we're able to extract the data. So it's been quite scary. But then other buildings, which has been amazing, this is what I say around how the projects have been so different. You get there and it's all organized. The documents and all the assets are stored in such a fashion that it's really easy for us to extract them and add them to the digital twin. The network's secure. They've got managed IT. So it really is. It's almost like a lottery. And so where I said about those inquiries, we're working with these property companies at the moment, we're running around these buildings performing a gap analysis, and some clients have been exceptionally lucky. They've got all the kit and we can switch the software on in as quick as a month, maybe even quicker. And then they've got other buildings where we're like, in all reality, this is probably a year's project to bring it up to speed. But what's really nice is what we've formulated from this is a set of guidelines now. So you can contract with my company and you don't need to buy the software. You can buy our consultancy service, which is smart enabling your building. So making sure all these systems are ready for software like ours. And we use open protocol. So none of this is closed protocol. So, sadly, as I hate to admit it, as more competitors hit the market, it's open, so they'll be able to interrupt with the building as well. And I think that's the way forward, to be honest with you. I think the only way we're really going to see a huge innovation in this space is through adopting open technologies, and we're dead against proprietary technologies being deployed within buildings.
Absolutely. And one of the things we hear about property is how complicated it is in terms of the procurement, all the different suppliers, the different materials, contractors, consultants, and I've heard it said in the past that there is a sort of systemic blockage against new ways of doing things and more energy efficient systems, lighting, whatever it is, because of that fractured procurement process. That if a building is being redeveloped or a new build, then that consultant will not be interested in the maintenance of the lighting that goes in, because that gets passed on to somebody else and they don't want to save or spend the extra money on that system. And so, you know, it takes an exceptionally forthright developer at the top to insist on this throughout, that it can't be negated and dropped in the process. Are you finding that procurement is having to be turned on its head to enable this?
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And actually, 5 years ago, that was definitely the case. What we've noticed is developers, I think, really being forced by the fund that might back the developer, or just the way the market's moving, to bring in the in-use companies, the property management company, the FM companies, us as a software company that's an in-use product earlier on. So, you know, as early as, say, REBA stage 2 or 3, and be there for the whole process, because I think, you know, a lot of property companies have been sick of picking up an asset once it's been developed, and like you say, the handover's not been worked really well. None of the systems work, especially lifts. Lifts tend to be a point of contention. And so what we're doing now is, from REBA stage 2 onwards, bringing these partners in and consulting. And I think the best thing about our software is in-use software. So we're incentivized for this to work for the lifetime of the building. We're not there just to say, oh, look, it works on day one when the building PCs and the developer hands over the keys to the new owners. It's actually there for the lifetime. And I think that, plus bringing all the parties in. And so, for instance, you asked about the training earlier. On some of our buildings, with the property management company who will be taking our software over is already using the software before the building's complete, because the 3D model's available. Not all the systems are, because they're not all been installed, but we can see a current status of the systems by linking them up. So you'll be able to see, actually on floor 2, 20 of 50 fan call units have been installed. So you've sort of got a progress tracker there as well. And we actually prefer that, because there's less work to do at the end of the project. It's much more incremental and it's a lot more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see this getting to then? Presumably you've got product development ideas in the next year or two. What can you tell us about what we might be able to see?
Yeah, so most of our focus now is automation. So we are looking for the system to diagnose issues within the building, predominantly at the moment looking for the energy side. So working with energy consultants, but also to formulate a algorithm that will be able to target all the buildings within our system and come up with the anomalies that need to be solved to save energy. That's where our core focus is now. I think the last sort of 4 or 5 years been getting the data into the system. The next 4 or 5 years will be using that data to improve the performance of the buildings.
How close are you to automation then?
Well, we have it already, but it's quite rudimentary. You know, it's more around occupancy. You know, if this floor is not being used, we can disable the AC or turn the lights off. We can also alter the schedule based on booking. So if someone books the space, we'll bring the schedule on and in line with that. If the space is not booked over a week. And so that's our sort of simple rules engine we have deployed at present. What we're looking at now is looking at every single data point and then running an algorithm against that to understand if things are operating outside of the designed operations.
Yeah, you're obviously quite advanced with this, and a lot of people are just starting to think about building digital twin into their systems. What does the competition look like for you? Are there big players that are moving into this from big tech or other startups that it's or independent businesses that are doing this?
Yeah, one of our clients described it to us quite nicely the other day. They said that you've approached this from the app first. So we originally designed our smartphone app, which was the smart building app that has all these controls, and then because we've linked every system possible to that app, When we then got our hands on the 3D model, we're like, well, we can link this to our data points and have a complete picture of the building, which is our smart building operating system. A lot of our competitors have gone the other direction. So they've been in the BMS world, so very much the engineering side of things, not so much the end user, but now they are sort of coming towards deploying apps that are linked to their BMS. So we've sort of gone in two different directions, which is interesting. We personally believe, obviously, the user experience for the occupier, having that simple, easy to use interface works for everyone. We probably feel that some BMS systems can be overly complicated.
Yeah. And from your own business ownership point of view, what do you think the plan is? Are you looking at an exit? Do you think there'll be some big global company come and snap you up, or are you looking to raise?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We've never done a fundraise, so we're what we call a bootstrapped company, so a business. It's founded by me and my brother Tom. We're still very much involved in the business day to day. We really enjoy what we do. And so at the present, it's all about growth and just adding more buildings to the system. We're really excited to get these buildings online internationally. I couldn't say no, there won't be an exit in the future, but at present, it's really just sort of growing the business. The fundraising one's an interesting one because we've done so well to get where we are without the fundraising, and we do love being fully in control of our destiny. It'd have to be a very attractive offer, but not ruling it out completely.
Yeah. And how much are you turning over then, or how much do you expect to this year?
I wouldn't want to share that information today, if that's okay.
Right. But are you profitable?
Oh, yeah. We've been profitable since 2010. So even our first year of business, albeit it was a minimal amount of revenue, we were on a minimum wage back then. We've been profitable throughout the lifetime of business. We've been very, very fortunate. Our background was writing software. We wrote Marriott's European booking engine for meeting rooms and conferencing. And that's when we first started to get introduced to smart building technologies and iBeacon and those sort of things. And by having that background, developing that kind of software, it gave us the revenue to really scale up and develop this software. And at present, the majority of our profits are still going into R&D, but we're definitely bearing the fruits of that now. We're seeing the benefits of that as the business scales up.
Yeah, and flipping that into R&D for developers, how are they, when you're sitting across the table and you're talking about deploying this and buying in software, extra kit and sensors and what have you, are they seeing this as an investment? Are they seeing this as part of a technology budget they've got? Or how's that working out in the business plans for those developers?
Yeah, I think there's an investment in technology to make sure that their product is relevant. So I feel that sometimes on the newer developments, we come out of the marketing budget to a certain extent. Because if they can provide an app and a portal like this to manage the property, it's very attractive to the occupiers moving in. One of the things that's happened is we were second guessing the occupier for a long time. So we were developing this for landlords who are then, but the main users would be the occupiers of the building. On some of our large assets, like 22 Bishopsgate, Hanover Square, we're now building the app for the occupier. So we've got the new app for Beasley. We have a new app for one of the occupiers at Hanover Square. And so they're sort of taking the software to the next level. And so that's been fantastic for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Before we wrap up, is there any clever features you want to show us that we haven't seen?
Well, I think one of the key things is we find that actually lifts are one of the harder systems to integrate into our platform. And so we've recently launched the lift control device within here. So if I go down to the ground floor, I can select the lifts here. We have full control of the lifts. We've found that actually you can also resequence lifts as well. So if you find that one's being used more than the other, you can actually put a preference towards the other cars. And I think that's going to really keep the devices operating for longer over time, because you have even use. We frequently find chillers on the roof of buildings. Some of the chillers never come into sequence because it's only when the building's at full load. What we can do is resequence them, so the one that has got less miles starts to get used more. And I think we will definitely move away from sort of time-based servicing to in-use, and so looking at actually how many miles or how many times that something's been used, rather than just because it's 6 months replacing filters or bearings unnecessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. Much more efficient use of the assets.
Yeah.
And that's been fascinating, and thank you for being so candid and showing us inside the Smart Spaces digital twin in operation. Dan Drogman, thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.